Norma, a Pacific hurricane threat on tonight's tropical weather bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for October 18th. So one storm dies off, that was Sean, and another one sparks up, and that's Tropical Storm Norma in the eastern Pacific, and that could become a substantial hurricane in the next few days. We also have Tropical Depression 16, which has formed now in the western Pacific, South China Sea, near the coast of Vietnam. Day 140 in the Atlantic, and we're still monitoring that area of interest at 70% as it's generally parading through the central Atlantic there, still at a low latitude, and we still expect it to move off towards the northwest and around towards the northeast afterwards, possibly affecting the Lesser Antilles. Day 156 in the eastern Pacific, we've got the formation of Tropical Storm Norma, which has been coming, and an area of interest to its east, which is now at 60% chance, but still quite uncertain whether that one will actually form or how strong it might get. In the western Pacific, as mentioned, Tropical Depression 16 and another area of interest way over there near the international dateline actually at the moment, 10% in the next 7 days, so we're not confident about that one at all. And moving to the Indian Ocean, we are starting to get those chances really getting high now with those two areas of interest. 80% chance in the Arabian Sea, really looks like that will form now, and 40% in the Bay of Bengal. Might take a little bit more time to see that one get going, if it does indeed do that. And in the southern hemisphere, 60% chance now for this area of interest in the South Pacific, which really would be quite a surprising early season start to the southern hemisphere as a whole. 60% there, and could become a significant cyclone as well, not just a weak one. Well, let's take a look at Norma then, the only actual tropical storm active. It is 755 kilometers from Manzanillo, 883 from Puerto Vallarta, 950 from Guadalajara, 1132 from Cabo San Lucas, and 1146 from Mazatlan. No watches or warnings are in effect at this time, but the National Hurricane Center expect that it will become a high-end Category 2 hurricane on their first forecast, borderline Category 3, and will approach the southern tip of the Baja California peninsula near that intensity as we get to the weekend into early next week. Satellite imagery then, we're looking first of all at Norma, and it really is looking good on this latest imagery. Its rotation has really started to come together early this morning, and now as we get towards the evening hours, it's really looking good. Convection blowing up along a semicircle there around the west through to the north and northeastern side, and already the beginnings of sort of a false eye feature there, certainly not a real eye at this stage, but it does look like its intensity will be on the increase quite quickly there. Well, here's Tropical Depression 16W, which is just south of Hainan Island off the coast of Vietnam as well, and it is moving gradually towards the northwest into the Gulf of Tonkin. It is expected to brush the west coast of Hainan now at this point, and it's really got lots of convection blowing up, so it is going to be a big rain producer. Looks like it's being heavily sheared from the east, and so it is struggling, and it will continue to struggle really, but there is one small chance that it could really intensify over those warm waters. Radar imagery there, quite clearly seeing the rotation, a lot of radar noise in there, but still looking decent. Now here's the Indian Ocean. You can clearly see some swirliness going on in the Arabian Sea. That's the system that we're going to be watching very closely there, especially for the Arabian Peninsula. And there finally is the Atlantic system, Invest 94L, which is extremely broad at the moment and not looking very good. It is going to continue to struggle, but it will get more favourable for that system later on this week. Sea surface temperatures still look pretty decent in the eastern Pacific off the coast of Mexico particularly, over 30 degrees in a few spots including where Norma is headed. In the Atlantic, Caribbean still very much above average and very warm, 30 degrees pushing 32, same case there for the southern Bahamas into the Turks and Caicos Islands, and also in part of the open Atlantic Ocean in the deep tropics there. Western Pacific looking good around the Philippine Islands, eastwards towards the Marianas and beyond towards Micronesia as well. Where 16W is, those temperatures aren't quite as hot at this point, 29 degrees Celsius, a little bit there, but it will gradually fall to around 27 as it moves further north off the coast of Haiphong, Vietnam. The Bay of Bengal is very warm, over 30 degrees Celsius. If a storm forms there, it will have some joy. And in the Arabian Sea, looking decent, 28 degrees generally. And in the southwest Indian Ocean, temperatures starting to warm up there as well, especially in the Mozambique Channel. Up the coast of Australia, starting to warm up there near Western Australia, and you'll see out towards the Coral Sea pretty chilly still at this point. But where that system might be forming at a very low latitude, temperatures are very warm there right now towards the northern Vanuatu and central Vanuatu islands. It's warm enough. Compared to average, this is what it looks like. Most of the North Indian Ocean is above average, and the South China Sea. Western Pacific only a little bit above average. Eastern Pacific generally very above average, apart from the Lydia cool there. And in the South Pacific, it is above average in the lower latitudes, but a little bit below further south. The Atlantic very warm compared to average as well, mainly in the deep tropics. Oceanic heat content is still pretty high, let's say, in the Caribbean Sea and through the Bahamas there, the Lucayan Archipelago, and very high amounts of energy. Eastern Pacific, a few spots there of decent amounts there as well, especially where Norma is right now, and in the Western Pacific, very much high energy values off the coast of the Philippines. So the GFS computer model, what does it have in store for the next 5 days? Well, first of all, looking at the Atlantic once again, and we have this system becoming a hurricane in that period. And once again, there's still the massive contrast between the GFS and the European model, and one or two of the others as well now, completely taking away the storm. But you've got the GFS and I think the CMC, which produces a substantial storm, hurricane equivalent there, as it recurves off towards the north. Certainly one to watch there for the Lesser Antilles though. Eastern Pacific then, we've got Norma, which is obviously going to be the dominant system. The other system behind it struggling on the GFS, barely making it to tropical cyclone status and stays put pretty much. Then you've got Norma, it starts to stall there as it reaches quite close to the southern tip of the Baja California peninsula, so it stalls there, delivering tropical storm force winds to Cabo San Lucas, etc., and could also deliver hurricane force winds, and it will struggle a little bit there to maintain its intensity. Looking at the Western Pacific, you can briefly see that storm there filling up quite a bit actually in the Gulf of Tonkin briefly, and then weakening and falling apart. Then you've got that significant cyclone in the Arabian Sea, develops quite far west now on the GFS solution, and not much out of that Bay of Bengal system, at least within the 5-day period. There's another closer look at that Western Pacific system, and then the formation of the Arabian Sea system there, becoming quite a potent cyclone there, probably bordering on category 4 by day 5. And this South Pacific system then, you'll see it eventually forming and gets quite a decent rotation going about it. There it is, quite a large system, and really wrapping up nicely by the time we get to the 22nd, 23rd of October. So that is through the weekend there, as it starts to approach the Solomon Islands and the northern Vanuatu Islands, in which it will go on and impact. Well, looking at the rainfall expectations, mainly for the Vietnam system, because that's still the one that is going to be producing the highest amount of rain in the next 7 days. Well, there it is. You can see along some of the coastlines of the China-Vietnam border area and further south around Da Nang towards central Vietnam, we're looking at high amounts of rainfall. Localized amounts near the coast could reach above 16 inches, that's 400 millimeters, and if the storm moves further towards the coastline when it's peaking, it could produce near 24 inches of rainfall, that is 600 millimeters. Also, incidental rain amounts elsewhere towards Hanoi, maybe up to 4 inches at most, 100 millimeters, and towards Hong Kong and Macau, possibly a similar value of around 100 millimeters there as well. Whether it's completely to do with that system, I'm not sure. In the longer range, day 5 to 10, you'll see the continuation of that Atlantic hurricane doesn't affect any land areas directly, a very small compact system, and completely gets absorbed by an extratropical system later on. But look at this development near the end of that 10-day period, a large system forming out of what looks like maybe a front there in the end, becomes a tropical cyclone by the looks of things, and I can tell you later on in that run it starts to peel off towards the north, but it could be a threat to Bermuda. Well, looking at Norma's continuation, after stalling for a bit, it then decidedly goes off towards the northeast, slams into Mexico and through into Texas as a post-tropical system, still with some strong winds there, interestingly. So that's Norma's story. A hurricane there, possibly Category 2, as it approaches that landfall, and then sweeps across the mountains, and then its remnants through Texas, and ends up reaching Chicago, actually, there on that graphic. And I think this other system is what's left of that 60% still swirling around in very much the same area it started. So a lot to talk about there. Looking at the Western Pacific, well, another system starts up. The GFS has had something like this on the cards for a good while, and it's been putting it back quite a bit now. It might even be that 10% that we currently have marked. It's quite difficult to tell at this point. I think it is. And then it moves towards the north recurve, so it doesn't affect any land areas, but could become a substantial typhoon. That's quite a typical track, actually, for this time of year. Now, looking at this Arabian Sea cyclone getting really powerful there and then skimming the coast of Oman, an unusual track there, moving off towards the northeast, and then it makes it all the way to the coast of Iran near the border with Pakistan there, so could potentially be a very dangerous storm, certainly is. And the Bay of Bengal system also forming there last minute, not long before landfall, and it blows up into a hurricane equivalent as well, but it weakens a lot before landfall in Myanmar at that point. But of course, these are very uncertain scenarios and could change at short notice. Similarly, for this South Pacific system, look at it go. Probably a Category 3 there as it moves through Vanuatu, which would really be a substantial impact, a severe impact situation there, and then stalls out to the southwest of Fiji. We don't usually see anything like this so early in the season, but there it is. I think we've had Category 3s once or twice before in October in the South Pacific, but it is pretty rare. You can talk, well, we're not on that part yet. You can visit the Force 13 merch store by scanning the barcode and taking a look at all of our usual products, as well as our full season and individual storm animations by request. And are still waiting for Hainan t-shirts, which are absolutely still waiting. Well, in the silly range, we've only really got to look at the Eastern Pacific, and it's something that ends up forming there. That could even still be from that 60% that we have already marked, that only finally develops at that point, but either way, something ends up developing there late season, and then moving into the coast of Mexico, not far from Manzanillo to the west. Of course, that's very long range, we can't be certain about that at all, and right at the very end of that 16-day period, another system forming up. So that would be a very busy end to the East Pac hurricane season if all that comes to pass. You can talk about all of that. We showed so much there on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13 for tropical weather or general weather chat with members from all around the world. A breathless bulletin there. Well, on this day, it was 1906 when we had a powerful Category 3 hurricane which moved into Cuba, Havana, and then on towards the Florida Keys and the Florida Peninsula near that Category 3 strength. Powerful and destructive storm, although it was probably overshadowed that year by one that occurred the previous month that decimated, well, severely impacted Pensacola and Mobile and that region. That was another hurricane. We also had Tropical Storm 9, which was moving into eastern Florida at the same time, Tropical Storm 10, which was over in the western Atlantic, and Tropical Storm 18, I think that said, in the western Pacific over there as well. 67 storms so far this year. The next name in the Atlantic is Tammy. In the eastern Pacific now, the next name is Otis, and in the Central Pacific, it is still Hainan. You gotta laugh, haven't you? In the Western Pacific, we may be about to see Samba, not named yet though. North Indian Ocean, next name there is Tej. Similarly, we might see that fairly soon as well. And in the southern hemisphere, we've got some names on the way by the looks of things, especially in the South Pacific. The next name there is Lola. Southwest Indian Ocean, we'll start with Alvaro, and the next name in Australia is Jasper. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.